So our whole theme for the month of March, new month, can't believe it, it's March already. Whew, our whole theme for the month of March is realizing the power of the mind. I believe that when enough of us realize the power that we have right here and understand how it works, then the world of our vision for the year, the world that works for everyone and for all life, will appear. I love the way John Waterhouse says it. A world that works for everyone, where everyone knows how it works. Yeah. Where everyone knows how it works. So much of what we teach here is about becoming good at using the power of the mind, using it in ways that are productive instead of using it in ways that set us back, which is one of the things that we learn as we grow up on this planet, is how to keep ourselves small through the power of our own minds, right? We don't teach people what to think, but rather how to use the characteristics of the mind to choose bigger, to choose thoughts and beliefs and perceptions that bring about good changes in our lives and in ourselves as we become all that we came here to be. Even the way we pray, which we call spiritual mind treatment, because we're treating our minds to spiritual truth, even that is about changing our mindset. It's not about changing God. Prayer doesn't change God, it changes us. So before I go any further, let me speak to that word God. I know some of us go, ugh, every time we hear it, right? Many of us have knee-jerk reactions to that word. And so I want to say that the way I use it is as a short way to reference the power of the universe, the consciousness of the universe, the intelligence of creation, the love that maintains the universe, that goes by 10,000 names, that you can call it any name that suits you, because God doesn't care. You can call it Great Spirit or the Atman or Buddha nature or universal intelligence or whatever you want. But God is the shorthand for all of that. I can't say that every time or I'd never say anything else, right? It is the energy and power and life of the universe. But the way you feel it and understand it and personalize it is up to you. It's up to you. It is a very individual thing, I think. So realizing the power of the mind, in my thinking, the foundation of realizing that power is to realize that the mind we're using is the mind of God, whatever you call it. We're part of it. And so we use its mind, so to speak. It is individualized but not separate in us. And when we understand that, then we can swing out into the universal, as our founder Ernest Holmes would say. Stop being trapped in the confines of the ego and swing out into that infinite and universal power and presence. In a little statement that Ernest Holmes called What I Believe, he said that God is an indwelling presence, and that it is personal to all who feel this indwelling presence. So our spiritual practices are aimed at developing the feeling of this indwelling presence, coming into a personal relationship with it. As today's reading said, we can get stuck in the abstract and forget, how did it put it? Forget the living presence that is everywhere, including inside of us. And so why do we do that? Because the only God that we can know is the one that we have that relationship with, that relationship of understanding and feeling and knowing. We can't know anything outside of that. We can think about it, but we can't know it until we enter into that inner relationship. The only power that we can use to expand our happiness and to increase our joy and to create more justice and peace in the world is the power we know about. It's sort of like, your grandmother opens a savings account for you when you're born but doesn't tell anybody, and each holiday and birthday she puts money in it but doesn't tell anybody it even exists. And so you're an adult now and it's worth some real money, but you don't even know it's there. You can't use it, and you don't even know how to access it until you know it exists, right? It's kind of like that. We come to know this indwelling practice or presence through our spiritual practice, through silence, through meditation, through inward focus, I think most of all through willingness. And then it begins to permeate everything that we do and are in the world. So at the end of this little encouragement this morning, I'm going to do a little meditative process that gives us another way to know this indwelling presence, because I think the more we practice that, the more we know it, and the more we lean into it, and the more we understand it. And once we get into relationship with it, we can let that power that flows through us start to change us. Once we know it, our ways of thinking, our ways of perceiving, our beliefs about the world begin to change, and the habits of thought that make us unhappy and sick and feeling like we're lacking begin to change. Once we know it, we start to allow it to flow through us and to make our lives different. Because I think we all want to be happy. It's part of why we exist, to find the joy in life. We all want to be happy and feel abundant and feel satisfied and like we're contributing and feel loved. And so does this indwelling presence. It's having its experience by means of each one of us. So it wants the fullest experience it can possibly have. Why would it want anything else for us but that kind of joy and that kind of satisfaction and that kind of happiness? I want to read a little section that was published in our magazine it's called The Science of Mind. The magazine's been in continuous publication since 1925. This was an article that was printed sometime before Ernest Holmes made his transition in 1960, but it's quoted as 1963, so you can find it in the archive somewhere, I'm sure. He said, "Our need for happiness is one of the greatest needs we have. Happiness springs out of enthusiasm. An unenthusiastic person is an unanimated person. The whole psychological and physiological processes of his being are slowed down, resulting in mental and physical congestion." I've been there and done that. "Our need for happiness is psychological because the mind is morbid without it." Been there, done that. "And it is physiological because the body cannot be well without it." And, there's more evidence of that coming out all the time, that deep unhappiness and depression and states of focusing on what's going wrong make us sick. And they weaken our immune systems, and they tear the body apart. Let me go on with his quote here. "The trouble with us is that we have tried to attach God to our finite selves and have not gotten very far, because our little self is sick mentally and physically. It is mathematically certain that we cannot contract the infinite, but we can expand the finite. We have to expand the self and attach our ego to the real self, which is God. We must do something definite to assure the intellect and emotions that there is nothing in the universe to be afraid of." I love that little quote. We have to expand the finite. We have to let our ego self begin to consider the infinite part of its nature, and let that ego self be transmuted by the real self, the divine self, the infinite self. And of course, because we're human, our human self looks out there for answers. That's what we're trained to do, right? We seek answers from other people, from our education, from the government, from demagogues, from religious affiliations. What we get in return when we seek outside ourselves, for the most part, is other people's limitations. That's what we get in as a response, right? In school, we learn our teachers' limitations. When we get religious dogma, it's taught to us by people with their own sets of limitations. And I grew up Catholic, having narrowly escaped growing up Mormon, both of which, well, it kind of feels that way. I'm from Utah. What can I say? And so I was told, that there were all these barriers to my own ability to experience the indwelling presence, but because I was female, I couldn't leap those barriers in either one of those religions. Women aren't allowed. So I was raised up with these ideas that God was somehow inaccessible to me. We carry that baggage around with us, thinking that it's the truth of who we are, until something, I know what it is, I call it the soul, something inside of us, the something that's connected to the ocean of God, starts to kick and scream and say, expand already, will you? Expand outward, expand the finite. Our human nature is seeking balance in the outside world that coincides with our personal relationship with the divine. But because the view is outward, the balance can only come with an inward view, with as much of an inward view, seeking and being willing to feel the power of the indwelling presence as much as we look outside ourselves for feedback, which is really what it is. It's not answers, it's feedback, right? The answers are here, the intimate and individualized connection that animates us and enlivens us and allows us to be happy and trustful. It's the thing that enthuses us, as Ernest Holmes said, and allows happiness and joy and health and more to flow from the very heart of God into the human experience through you and me. Into the world, into the whole of the human experience. It allows our minds to become the minds of God and our hearts to become the hearts of God when we create that connection within ourselves. And of course, when we look from that perspective, we realize something about life. And that is that the universe seems to proceed in a pretty harmonious flow. Unless we're looking for the discord in it, it's pretty harmonious. And one of the ways we look for the discord is by watching the news, which is about 0.5% of what goes on in the world, but it's all about the discord. The 99.5% of the other stuff that's going along is a harmonious flow. When we realize that and start to look there, we cease resisting the flow. We cease to resist the flow and we start to surrender to that greater idea that there is a harmonious flow in the universe and there's happiness and harmony. The psalmist said, "Blessed are those who dwell in your house, for they shall praise you for eternity." I think the house that he was talking about is that sense of indwelling presence that we develop. And every single one of us has equal access to it, to this welcoming, unconditionally loving, infinite presence that resides within us. It's been there all the time, and it always will be. But and at some point, you will turn your attention in that direction. And if you allow it, you will become more happy and more healed and more whole. And the when is entirely up to you. We can fight it, but sometime in eternity, it's inevitable that we'll turn toward it and say yes. All we have to do is say yes to it, align ourselves with it, and open ourselves to it. I think the very essence of who we are, when I think about the way the body functions, this map of life that is me, that essence rests in an idea that is divine. It's so much bigger than, I could not imagine how to keep my heart pumping, could you? We couldn't make those fine little adjustments in chemistry and electricity and fields and all that stuff. It's just required to get through a day. We can't do it. There is an infinite divine pattern in here that created me and my life. And why then do we sometimes insist on doing life all by ourselves? Without that interconnection. And without the connection that springs from it when we start looking around at other people and realizing they're the same miracles that we are. Wow. And that they are also the dwelling place of the infinite. When we let ourselves surrender to that, we're not surrendering anything, we're surrendering to the flow of that thing that has its being and moves by means of us, then we're at the place of faith. The faith that simply says, I am that I am. That's the faith of God that Ernest Holmes talks about in his writings. It's not faith in God, it is the faith of God from inside out. We can stop believing then the old stuff that we believed about ourselves. We can, choose something different. Because as I've looked at it, and I'm sure this has occurred to you too, most of it is someone else's limitation that we've adopted and set up as our own truth, our own being. And so, with the support of our spiritual community and our spiritual teachings and our spiritual practices, we begin to create new beliefs about who we are and what we came here to be, and about the world we live in. This is a really interesting question to ask yourself. If you look at a belief you have and imagine you didn't have it, what new belief would spring up in its stead? And the point is to be able to choose it wisely, to be able to choose it productively. Jesus told us, it is done unto you as you believe. So why not create new beliefs that support happiness and joy and freedom and abundance and well-being? Why not? Ernest Holmes, again, the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living's philosophy, The Science of Mind and Spirit, said, the indwelling God is the greatest single factor in our whole lives. It means that there is nothing between us and the infinite. There is no place to go to find God. God already exists in the midst of us. And if we try to seek elsewhere, it's like God trying to hunt for itself. God is not lost. And neither are we lost or separated from God. The more completely we are able to see God in everything, the more completely will the one God in all things respond to us. The more enthusiastic about life we'll be, the happier we'll be, the healthier and more abundant we will feel, the more loving we will become. This is one of my favorite stories. I think I've told it before. There was a kindergarten teacher who was wandering around the class as her kids were drawing, and she was just checking out what they were drawing. And she walked up to Susie's desk, and Susie was working really hard. She was really diligent. And the teacher said, Susie, what are you drawing? And she said, God. And the teacher said, nobody knows what God looks like. And Susie said, they will in a minute. I love that story. That is the place we come from, right? They will in a minute. They will know. If we could allow ourselves to think that way and realize that the only obstruction we put between us and God is an idea that we're separate. Ideas that were placed there by other people's limitations that we adopted. If we were able to think like that little girl and know, I know what God looks like. I'm going to draw it so I can show people what this thing inside of me looks like. I know what it feels like. I'm going to find a way to tell people what this God within me feels like. I'm going to find a way to let it bubble up and through everything that I do. Whew! I just got like awe bumps. See, it's up to us to avail ourselves of that presence that's already there. It's up to us to open ourselves to relationship with it. It's up to us to welcome it and take advantage of the innocence of that childlike idea of unconditional love and eternal infinite availability and source closer than our heartbeats. So let's do a little meditation, shall we? And see if we can open up our hearts a little bit more to that. So I invite you to just be comfortable in your chairs, supported. Gravity is doing all the work. You don't have to do a thing. And as you inhale and exhale, just let your shoulders drop. Let your muscles relax. Let anything that resembles tension just drain away. Just relax and breathe. Every single spiritual tradition has a symbol for the indwelling presence of God. And every spiritual tradition has meditative ways of recognizing the indwelling spirit, of entering into relationship with it. The Golden Buddha meditation. Meditation on the Sephirot of Kabbalah. Meditation on inner light and sound from the Jains and the Sufis. Contemplation of the Holy Spirit. This relationship is deeply personal to each one of us. So as you breathe, ask yourself what your definition of God, Spirit, infinite intelligence, what is that definition for you? What does it mean to you? And let your mind and heart offer up a symbol of this intelligence, this power, this love, this God. And just let yourself perceive it in whatever way you perceive it. Maybe for you it is visual, or maybe it's feeling, or maybe it's sound, a voice, music, whatever that symbol is. Just imagine yourself in the presence of the infinite one that is symbolized thus for you. Perhaps you can see a vast and mighty, yet gentle and loving being. Perhaps you can feel it as an energy of joy and peace and love. Perhaps you can hear it, just rest in it. Just open your heart so that you can feel how precious you are to this energy, this being, this God. It created you. It beats your heart. It breathes you. You are its beloved. And everything you say or think or do is its expression. How completely and totally loved You are. And now imagine that this presence starts to become condensed, smaller and smaller, more and more condensed. It becomes smaller and smaller until you can fit it in the palm of your hand, whatever the symbol is. Now you raise your hand to your heart, and the symbol slips gently in. This power and joy and happiness and love now lives right inside your heart, permanently, forever. And knowing that this truth about yourself, that you carry all that God is right within your heart. Knowing that you bring this truth back with you and that it stays with you always. Just begin to return your awareness and attention to this room, to this moment, to the chair beneath you. And remember with me that this indwelling presence is power. The same power and presence that breathed the universe into existence. It is not some power, it is all power. Remember with me that this presence and power is wisdom. Not a little wisdom, but all wisdom. Remember that it is not a little love, but infinite and unconditional love. Vast, unconditional, life-bringing, eternal, abundant, joy-filled. It is. You are. I am. We are. Each of us is the place that this power and wisdom and love and life has shown up. Each of us is the place it all is expressed, celebrated, enjoyed enthusiastically. And so right here and right now, and every here and every now, we say yes to it. We say yes to it. We say yes to its indwelling presence, the love that it has for us. We say yes to it and we simply let it have its way with us. It heals those broken places. It heals those mistaken thoughts. It heals those places of lack and powerlessness. It pours over us the balm of infinite and unconditional love. We feel that in our hearts. That love. We feel that wisdom in our minds. We feel that freedom in our souls. We feel the compassion in our relationships. We feel the joy when we awaken. We hear the voice in our voice in every word we speak. And knowing this is simply the truth of us, each one of us. I know that as we say yes, Spirit shouts a resounding yes to us. All that we need is already given. All our heart's desires are answered. This is the truth of our lives. And so in deepest gratitude, I simply release